scholarship and funding.
Okay, good afternoon.
Here we go,
Good
showtime.
afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Jorge Tamayo. I'm a professor in the strategy unit, and I am a co-PI of the Digital Reskilling Lab, and I'm very, very happy to be here with you today. So, for today, I'm going to show you what we are learning at the Digital Reskilling Lab. We will have, of course, a discussion around reskilling, right? I want to hear from you. And then we will open it up for a final discussion, okay? So the first thing I want to start with, sorry, let me just turn on this thing here, is, let's start with the basic question of why we're here in this room. And that, of course, you all know now about DQ, right? And the basic question that I want to start with is, why reskilling, right? I think that's the question why we're here, right? Now, we know that digital transformation basically is changing the demand for skills inside organizations, right? But what is really tricky about this digital transformation is that this digital transformation might increase this polarization between high and low skilled workers, right? So we know that up to 32% of the jobs might be radically transformed in just 3 to 4 years. Remember that what's going on is that this depreciation of skills, we now have a steeper depreciation of the skills. It used to be 5 to 10 years. Now we are talking about 3 years, right? That's how fast the skills are depreciated these days. Goldman Sachs estimates that around 300 million jobs need to be or are going to be affected by Gen AI. And in the case of Gen AI, right, while it might create new jobs, right, and new occupations, right, it also might substitute for tasks and jobs that were considered human prerogative, right? Those tasks and jobs for which we require specialized skills. And then one possible solution for these problems that we are seeing with the digital transformation is reskilling. And how should we think about reskilling? Basically, training that helps to acquire skills, to access a new occupation, a new job, in a very short period of time. That's how we should think about reskilling. And reskilling might help workers and firms to cope with these changes, right? The World Economic Forum estimates that around 1 billion people, right, might need to be reskilled to entirely new roles. So here we're thinking about actuaries into cybersecurity positions. Think about the car companies. Right now we have all these combustion engine mechanics that we need to reskill into electric engine experts, right? And what is really interesting and fascinating is that despite all the public announcements, the ongoing investments, right, all the reports that we read every single day, we have very little evidence about this issue of, well, what are the best practices when we think about reskilling? How should we do it? What is working? What is not working, right? What is the best design? How should we implement these reskilling initiatives inside the firm? And this is exactly what we are going to talk about today. And precisely, this is what we are doing at the lab, right? The Digital Reskilling Lab basically aims to develop new rigorous evidence and conceptual frameworks that help firms basically that are already or plan to invest in reskilling initiatives inside their organizations, okay? So this is where we are, and this is our plan for today. So basically, we will start with an initial discussion about reskilling, and then I will go and present some findings that are emerging from the lab. And of course, I want to listen to your feedback, right? I want to know if these findings resonate with you. Are we missing something that you think is really important, right? And of course, recruitment, super important. We would love to work with you, right? And what is really amazing is that it's free, right? Of course, we will need data. That's how we do our research. And if you want to run experiments with us, we're here, okay? So the first thing I want to start with, let me just bring this up. I want to start with the same question I had here, which is, why reskilling? Why reskilling is important? Why do we think that reskilling is important? And I want to hear from you. So who wants to, I need a brave volunteer, please.
I started in the company I work for is Procter & Gamble 35 years ago. The amount of change that I've seen in the past 5 years and the skills that it takes to do the job is much greater than in the previous 30 years. And to me, that's why you need to have reskilling.
Okay, so you are worried about the changes of the skills, right?
Yeah, it's accelerating. The rate of change is accelerating.
Right. It's changing rapidly, right, recently.
So looking at trends in technological advancement and innovation.
Right. Right, so now you're more concerned about the macro trends, right?
Yeah.
Macro trends, right? So how tech is changing. Now, let me ask you a question. How different is this new wave compared to the previous waves?
I mean, it's pretty sharp, especially this morning what we heard about AI, and especially those who are on ChatGPT 4, what it's doing now compared to ChatGPT 1. So what it means is if you do not catch up on new trends and updated data in ChatGPT, you would think you are good enough with GTP 1 or 2.
Right, so this is about impact, and I think it's related to what we were saying before about how fast, right, these macro trends basically are happening right now.
I'm running an education program for cybersecurity. So what we're seeing is that the technology is changing so fast. AI is a big component of that. We need workers, and there's 300,000 in just probably Massachusetts alone. There's 3 million open jobs in cybersecurity. So there aren't enough people to do the work. So there's got to be reskilling to get people to fill these critical positions.
Right, so we have this change in demand for skills that is creating these gaps, right?
Yeah.
That are very difficult to fill. And then it could be that with reskilling, we might be able to fill these gaps.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to add is the pace of delivery. I think the pace of delivery to what it was and what is coming up,
right,
and that has really risen exponentially, and that requires a retooling and a reskilling of individuals and the organization itself.
Can you elaborate a bit more on this pace?
Yeah. So when I'm saying of pace, is like fail fast, deliver fast. It's something that what used to take a month now, like the ask is, okay, how quickly can we turn around? So the turnaround time is. That needs to be accounted for when you're talking about the pace.
Yeah, the country I'm from, Japan, aging society, declining population.
Right. Very important. Demographics. Can you elaborate a bit more, Yoshimi?
Our population is currently at 130 million. By 2050, it's expected to be lower than 100 million. And a third of population currently is older than 60. So 1 in 3 people, is older than us, majority of here, yeah. And it is inclusive.
Fascinating. Yes.
I think also we have to learn to think differently with AI. And so it's about learning how to leverage and partner with AI and maybe using the term upskilling so that we're allowing the AI to do the more repetitive tasks and the more cognitive, judgmental tasks being adopted by humans.
Can you, this concept is huge. A lot of this concept of partnering with AI. Can you elaborate on what do you mean by partnering with AI?
I think about, like in the education sector, for example, not thinking of using generative AI as a form of plagiarism, but thinking about it as a new way of learning. And so thinking about AI not as a competitor or a substitute, but figuring out how to partner and use it productively while still, I heard you say the word last night, sort of doing the hard stuff.
Right. How these AI tools can complement what you do, right? And at the end will increase your productivity. Yes?
1 billion people unemployed is socially disrupting. Crime, homelessness, prison, you name it. We have to give people the opportunity to earn a living. and take care of themselves.
Right, and then what is interesting is that if you go to Latin America, for example, the informality rate is 50%. And then what is surprising is that if you go to cities, like there are cities in Latin America that are hubs for innovations, like Medellin. If you go to these cities, it's very difficult to find talent, and still you have 50% of informality. Right? How? And this is but right, like very important to address, right? And then this is connected to the role of the government, right? That we haven't talked about, right? What should be the role of the government, right? Given that we have these, in some countries and cities, we have these high informality rates, crime rates, right? That reskilling can help us, right, to move these workers to the labor force. Yes?
I have two things that have been kind of stuck in my head that I think are, in a way, sort of counter forces I would love to sort of throw out. One is the sense that I think for some lower skilled work, AI actually makes the workforce more fungible because of this idea of just-in-time delivery of knowledge. So if you are an EMT, you know, what gauge am I supposed to use? Or, you know, someone in a more technical skill, if you're a plumber, right? You actually might be able to move into certain types of jobs more easily with lower education and actually lower retraining because there's so much that can be delivered sort of just in time. So that's something I've been trying to grapple with. And then the second thing is, I think it's a really interesting point around the openings in cybersecurity, but there's also an amazing stat, which is for every solar technician we're going to need in the next 10 years, we're going to need 20 nurses. We have massive shortages in home healthcare aides and lower skilled care workers. And I feel like that gets totally left out of the digital reskilling conversation, but a bit to the demographics point, our economy is very dependent on filling those sorts of jobs. And I just don't know how to plug that into a conversation like this, but it feels really important.
Right, these skills that will be very difficult, right, to automate. And then I'll show you in a minute that there's a very interesting pattern about what is happening right now. If you go back to what happened, for example, in the 90s, right, with the information technologies, there we were talking about, well, which are the tasks that we can substitute, and then we were thinking about routine tasks versus more cognitive tasks. Now we are thinking that are the skills in the middle and high. Right now we are going after very different skills, and then I will come back to this point that is just very, very important. But then the question is that what's going to happen with these skills that we will not be able to automate? Nurses, right? Yesterday we were talking about trucking, right? There are a lot of industries that we still don't know. It's very early to understand what's going to happen.
Yeah. I think double-clicking on the profile of the people that fill those jobs is very important. There's this assumption that we're going to go bottom up, right? The lowest clerks fill those jobs, and then eventually it will make it to the C-suite. And there's the opposite point of view, that the white-collar jobs, that the really plump, chubby, mid-management jobs are the first ones to go, because what do? That is connective tissue inside the company, and you've seen NVIDIA does not need it. Broadcom does not need it. There are these companies that have a much broader sort of control. And if you just look at the BCG study that was done at EQ, I mean, these are people that came from classrooms like this one, and their productivity goes up by between 17 and 44%, just individual productivity. And then what do you do when you change the workflow in which they work? Then a whole bunch of them lose. So that profile, I think, is one of the most important things, which is the question, whom do you need to reskill?
Yeah.
Right, these profile of workers inside the firm, right? Okay, so I think we have really good reasons inside the firm why reskilling. Now, I want to go to really double click on reskilling and understand what are the positives and negatives of reskilling inside organizations. I know we can have reskilling. Government should think about reskilling. We are working with the Digital Reskilling Lab is working with different governments, but let's keep governments aside for a minute. Let's just focus on the firms. If we are worried about this profile of workers, right, that could, well, we can increase the productivity of these workers, right? These skills are changing inside. We need to find these complementary skills to the new technology. let's think about the positives and negatives inside organizations. Because one thing that we might be aware is that when we asked companies recently in a survey about reskilling, only a small share of companies are doing it correctly. There are still a lot of pieces that are missing, right? So let's try to understand why is that we are not seeing reskilling. So what are some of the positives and negatives of reskilling inside the organization? I mean, why reskilling is important for organizations?
I would think like change is hard, and people may not want to switch and adapt to the changes, and also it can be expensive to train your employees. And
can you elaborate a bit on what do we need to change?
Yeah, like if somebody's just used to, type in their own emails and they don't trust ChatGPT, right? Now it's going to take them longer than somebody that uses ChatGPT, right?
So we can change the organization, right? But we can also change the skills inside the organization, right? And then here, we are talking more about the skills of the worker, right? And then here, we are talking more about the changes of the organization.
So one benefit to the organization is it preserves firm-specific human capital. So people tend to figure out how to get work done in an organization. If you keep losing those people, then you waste a lot of energy in retraining and helping people understand how to get their job done.
Can I ask you one question? What do you want to achieve when you preserve this human capital of the corporation? Why is it important for the organization?
It's expensive to create and expensive to lose.
Right. So basically, these can help us basically with what we call the pipeline of talent, right? Inside the organization. Okay. Yes?
Can I just take the opposite side of that for a second, which is in my company, the types of jobs that we would need to cut if we successfully migrate to AI are jobs like legal and accounting. And so, years of professional formation, technical training, et cetera. And if you're somebody who's like 45 or 55 that's been doing that for 20, 30 years, I think it's more likely that you're going to leave and go try to find a similar function in another firm. And the sort of the theoretical upskilled job that we'd invent, it might be cheaper, better to procure from the labor market as opposed to retaining sort of the old worker in the new job, even if, and I'm not even sure if the worker would want to stay.
Right. It's costly. It's costly for the firm, but it's also costly for the worker, right?
Yeah.
But now,
undesirable.
Right. So then you might say, it might be that it would be better for my organization just to outsource some of the activities instead of reskilling. Can we stay here for a second? When is that I should reskill, and when is that I should say, okay, no, I need to go outside, outsource this talent?
Yeah, if your technology stack is changing and you know that something new is coming up in the technology layer itself, then that will require reskilling.
Okay, so you're thinking that you can reskill when tech changes, okay?
Yeah.
But the technology is changing in this industry, right? And he's saying that it's better to go to the market.
But then again, I want to add that the human capital, the business domain knowledge that you lose, I mean, the cost to retrain a new hire may be higher as opposed to retaining an individual and training the individual on the new one.
But then AI is helping train them.
Okay, so tech change, and then it will be when it's really costly to hire, right?
Yeah.
Let's just stay here for a minute. This is really interesting. Yes.
I think it's going to democratize and flatten the hierarchies we have today. So, can I get more tech budget? Can I get more technologists? You're not going to need that because you're going to be able to train people who have a lot of domain experience to use these tools, and you're not going to need the technologists you have today to a lot of that stuff is going to be just more available to the average person if they're willing to adopt.
And if they're willing to change, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think this is a very important issue because even if it's cheaper to just import talent, if you're going to get away from people that have been there 20, 25 years,
right.
There's a certain corporate culture,
right.
There's loyalty, there's how people feel and train people into the culture of the company that you lose. And if you just lost that, it also could be a decrease in morale, that everybody's sort of here for itself and the new people may not come in and buy into the culture. So I'm not saying they shouldn't do it, but I just think it should be really well thought of at the top. When do they offer people retraining and when do they just let people go?
So here we have a fascinating trade-off, right? Between the culture of the company that could limit how fast that could go, right? But I preserve the culture of the company. But you need new skills and fast. So that's the other problem is that, well, if you go to the market, right, and hire these people from outside, well, this might not be good for the culture, but if I want to preserve the culture, it could be that I don't have the agility I need to move at the pace at which I need.
Well, I also think it depends on the size of the company, right? Because if you're talking about, someone who's an accountant or a lawyer needing to go into another field, the company may not be able to do that kind of retraining, and it just may not be in the company's best interest to be able to do that. You just may not have the jobs to put them in. So I think it works for like the tech workers that might have similar skills. But I also think another part of it is as you need more people who are prompt engineers, right? You'll also need those people who have the institutional knowledge and can oversee the AI.
I have something on that. Now, if you have the size, suppose you can create this dynamic marketing side, then you're okay. You're thinking that, yes, we should go for reskilling.
I do, but I think that many companies don't know how to. Internally, they don't have the knowledge or the people who will lead the reskilling.
But when you think about the organization, like what you're talking about is the capabilities. These capabilities, these require a bunch of new skills. Understand how is that I'm going to reallocate workers, because remember that reskilling is that I want to move my engineers, right, that combustion engine, that were expert in combustion engine, and I need to move them now to be electric engineers, right? Then I need to find a position for them, right? And then we need to think about, well, what is the commitment of the organization? Can I promise them that I will find a job for them? Yes.
We just heard all morning long how easy it is. I mean, my high schooler can ask these same questions that I can ask. So I don't really think that you need heavy. I think what it is it's either you have to change the mindset of the person that you're going to reskill, become a curious person again. When they were younger and curious and really wanted to, change the world, you kind of get back to that versus their current mindset, which is probably like, I go to work, I get my stuff done, I get this out the door, I'm done. It's a different mindset. And if they can't make that leap, then maybe you go somewhere else. But I feel like you've got to give that workforce an opportunity to make that leap. I don't think it's that difficult. It seems like these tools are making it very easy.
Do you need a specific, think about the culture of the company.
Yeah.
Can you do this in every organization independently of the culture? Because I think you're thinking that you don't need a specific capabilities, that you don't need a specific culture inside the organization to be able to change this mindset. Do we need that, or can you elaborate on that point?
You definitely need the top down that says it's okay to go be curious and start using these tools in your everyday. Absolutely, I think. The signal's got to come from the top.
Okay, and then we will come back to this point about who is responsible, right, for these reskilling initiatives inside the firm. So, yes.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on the question, because the question is, do you reskill or do you outsource?
Right.
And it's really not, that's not the way it sounded to me, is you're going to do reskilling, it's who you reskill. Mm-hmm. And it is not the people currently doing the role, because for them it feels like going down in their self-worth. It's you're reskilling another group of people for whom this may be a step up. So as an organization, you will have to maintain the skill level of your organization, but you may not be reskilling the people who are currently doing the task.
I want to come back to you. After hearing all these comments, what are your thoughts?
I just feel more worried and stressed out, but I think I've been doing a lot inside our company with learning, and because we've grown a lot, and so we have sort of different cultures, and I think it's really, really hard for certain types of grown-ups to learn, especially if they've been incentivized a certain way for a long time. So I'm a little bit more like, if you could do it, I think that's awesome. I guess it's probably a company-specific call. In my company, I think we're probably going to end up procuring a little bit more from the market.
Right, and then, you know what, we have a really nice paper where we show that people with higher tenure find it more difficult to reskill. It's really difficult for these workers to reskill, and this is a friction, real friction inside the firm. So, yes?
So you said who, but I think rather than who, what skills you want to focus, reskill within the corporation, and then what skill sets that you less prioritize, so outsource or something else.
So this is a very nice idea. So basically, it could be that we say, hey, there is a set of strategic skills, right, that are connected with the culture of the company. If I have a digital transformation process, there are some skills that are strategic that I will reskill, and then other skills that, perhaps in your case, that you will say, well, these are not that strategic skills, it will be very costly for the firm, then I can outsource these other skills in the market. And then notice that what we have here, right? We have good reasons why we want to reskill, right? With macro trends, these changes inside the firm, of course, the government is very interested in this. But then what is really interesting is that when you think about the reskilling, there are a lot of trade-offs that firms need to deal with. First one is, well, there's this very important trade-off between the culture and how fast you can go. But reskilling is great. You can improve the engagement of the workers, right? You can show the workers that there's a career path inside the firm, right? But of course, that will limit how fast you can do it. I mean, there are tech companies that are doing it really, really, really well, right? And now they have really dynamic internal labor market, but it's difficult to get to that point, right? So there's going to be this trade-off between, well, you want to preserve the culture of the company, you want to show the employees that you care about their skills, and then the problem is that if you want to do all that, that's super costly. It's hard, right? We need to change the organization, adapt the organization, and then that will limit how fast I will be able to go. Really important first trade-off. But then perhaps what we can do, right, this trade-off between the culture is find strategic skills that are strategic for the company, that are connected with the strategy of the company. And then if I just focus on these skills, right, that are key for my organization, I might be able to solve that trade-off. I want to come back to this really important question, which is, if I want to reskill, who is responsible inside the organization? Who should be responsible inside the organization?
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of Gen AI training, and I think 5,000, 30,000 employee companies here. There's clear budget for compliance. All 5,000 people take sexual harassment security. There's no company-wide upskilling budget. Who's going to spend $3.5 million, $10 million upskilling 30,000 people? So I think the reality of this gets very quickly to line managers who've got to buy into the ROI in this, other than it's just a bunch of HR happy talk. And we can have that, but if we're really talking about people coming out of college who are now making decisions based on how Gen AI savvy your company is, you're going to have to get pretty serious about those core roles you have.
Okay, you are saying that we need the buy-in of the middle managers. How involved the CEO and C-suite should be? How involved they should be?
Yeah, I mean, I think Moderna is a great example. They did it company-wide, multi-million dollars, making billions. That was easy here. I think most companies we're seeing can't get through a $1 to $8 million upskill all employee program. It's just not going to go through with all the trade-offs. So you have to get down to line managers who make the trade-off, and I think gets to the productivity
It's the first budget that gets cut, the learning budget.
What's it?
When things go south, it's the first thing that gets cut in companies, the learning and development budget.
Well, not when you're losing half your traders. You can't recruit traders because they don't want to come work for you anymore.
I'll say something controversial. The person whose job is in danger, it's their responsibility to do something about it. And the reason is top-down edicts in this particular case work only so well if the individual in question does not want to do it. So Dow has this matrix, hearts and minds. Do they see the way their career will advance with Gen AI? Do they have a predisposition to try to be curious about something? If they satisfy and do well on that matrix, great, you can retrain them. Otherwise, it is really, really hard to do this by top-down edict. Focus on the individual.
Right, an individual, like skills, like this is the idea of skills are at the center. Fernanda.
I think it should be the CEO because this is a strategic decision.
Right.
And to be honest, at the end of the day, if you don't do it properly, you have very clearly what you need to reskill, the skills you need, and you don't communicate properly, you can literally create chaos and panic in the organization.
Right, should be the CEO. It's a strategic imperative for the company. Then, if it's a strategic imperative, it should be the CEO.
Before we finish our session, I'd like to know if anybody has had success in retraining and something they would like to share.
Yes. Okay, let's pause for a second. Experiences in retraining. Yes?
Yeah, I think that low and no code tools have been around for a while, and if you've been training your non-technologists in those, they're kind of been training for this moment because AI makes it actually even easier. And so, and I think it's also existential. I don't think you can have the luxury of debating what you're going to do inside the four walls of your firm. You have to ask yourself, if my competitors are doing it and I'm not, am I going to exist? And I think people enjoy when you invest in them and also allow them to solve the problems. In financial services, which is all about, it's all in the ether, is always been for decades about the tech budget. I don't get enough tech budget for my business. And when you let people use low and no code solutions to solve their own problems, they feel super empowered. So I kind of feel like by using those tools over the last few years, we've been training our people for this. They're like psyched and ready to go.
Okay. Sorry, Jared.
Maybe I'll be backtracking, but I want to open this up a little bit. Looking at the responsibility. If you look at the agency arrangement, the CEO is accountable to the board of directors and the board of directors to the shareholders. So then it will be the responsibility of the board of directors looking at the strategic alignment of the organization and how they intend to compete. I think we can escalate it further and place it on the head of the board.
Okay. So CEO plus board. Right, so you and Fernanda think that this is strategic for the company, similar to what we just heard. That's why the CEO and the board should be responsible for reskilling. I want to go back to you, please. What are you here about? What do you think about these different perspectives?
I think it's going to get more specific. I think certainly CEO sets culture. We're actually going to reinvent the people, not. We're going to hire someone internally who really wants to learn Gen AI or someone off the street who already knows Gen AI. Are we going to have it in our budgets here? I think that's certainly one thing. But the reality is I think the one thing I'm really struggling with is skills. To me, is different than core competency. To me, skill is I know how to use Excel. We all were in the morning here. This is a core competency. I need a learning capability and a learning mindset for the next 3 or 4 years because this is the worst AI we're ever going to have in front of us. And it's only going to get better. So if I learn ChatGPT now and I train this person on this skill, it may be a different tool. So I think this core competency on these critical things is non-trivial. And someone's got to identify
skills, blue-collar skills, in an area where you don't have distinct talent pipeline. It's more challenging. Can I just give you an example real quick?
Yeah,
I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah.
Okay, so just from a government example, what I've been involved with is career pathing along data-driven, machine learning-based career pathing, really putting the emphasis on the manager level to define career paths, to solve some of these issues at the tactical level. In the example I would give, it's the DoD, specifically the Army's archaic World War II era infrastructure, part of a congressionally mandated, so Congress is really that main forcing function, part of a 15 years, 16 billion, three-phase effort to revitalize everything from how these 23 depots, arsenals, and ammo plants across the United States function. Robotics on the shop floor, things like that. Where it's impacting the skill level is you have these wage grade, blue collar workforce. I use a great example is the machine welder. So the welder knows what that spot weld looks like better than anybody. Deep technical expertise. With the robotics being brought on the shop floor and the robotic welder, he's now the operator of that cell. The reskill that's involved in that, it's going to the success story part of this. It has greatly improved accuracy, efficiency. It's happening not just in the Army, but across the DoD. Air Force is doing this down in Warner Robins, Georgia. Lots of places where this is taking hold, but where it's challenging is when you get to the nuances of what you have written up there with pipeline. A lot of these skills are very, very hard to train, and that deep subject matter expertise, you don't have that easy access. A lot of these 23 sites are not located near major metropolitan areas, so you don't have access to a lot of that talent pipeline. So you've got to be creative. There's other nuances that go into it, but I've seen it done well, and this is something that continues to be a priority for DoD.
I see. Let's get one more comment before we move on.
And this goes back to the question of whether it works. I think this goes to the philosophy of the company. My company is a promote from within company. So you enter at the base level and you go up. And it's 100,000 people, but it's everybody goes in basically through entry levels. So you have no choice but to do reskilling. My job, 100% of my time is devoted to reskilling the organization. So there's companies that do it because it is the only way that we can stay competitive is by reskilling the organization constantly. Because I cannot hire somebody to come and occupy this level. It's going to be through the base of the pyramid.
Related to this internal labor market, how do you create a pipeline? And then these are the challenges that we are hearing from the CHROs and COOs. That at the end, who should be responsible? Like if it's really strategic, if it's a strategic imperative, like in your case, the CEO should be on board. It will be very difficult, but I will show you in a minute that you need the buy-in of the middle manager. In fact, most of the frictions are with the middle manager. Okay, so what we're going to do is this. Let me walk you through some slides I prepared very quickly about some findings and how should we think about the big picture of reskilling, right? And then I'll come back and open it up for a final discussion. Okay, so my obsession with reskilling basically started with an older obsession, with the previous one. Oh, sorry. Okay, so my obsession for reskilling started with another obsession, productivity. Right? Basically, productivity is, you can think about measures how the efficiency with which inputs are used, right? And what is really fascinating about productivity is that you have this huge dispersion across countries. But the one thing that you should remember about productivity is how much it matters for living standards, right? If we're more productive, we have more resources for education, for health, and so on and so forth. Okay? Now, the one problem about productivity is this one, is that productivity growth, right, has been disappointing in recent years. And if we want to understand why is that we have this slowdown in productivity, well, the first thing we need to look at is the technological diffusion across firms. So what I have here is basically the productivity of the frontier firms and what we call the laggards, right? And what you can see is that the gap between these global firms, frontier firms, right, and the other firms, basically, this gap has been widening across the years. And this tells you that something is going on with the technological diffusion across firms. It was not like this in the 50s and 60s. So basically, what we can do is to go back and see what happened with the other technological waves, right, and see what we can learn, right? We have quite few technological waves, right, that we went through during the last 100 years. So let's see what we can learn. And then one thing that is very important, and I want to clarify, is that when we think about technological diffusion, we are not thinking about website visitors, right? We are not thinking about users. The way we think about technological diffusion is that if you can really adopt these new technologies inside your firm, right? And this is not easy. Think about electricity. The first electric generator was ready to go to the market in 1880, but electricity showed its effects on productivity 40 years later, in 1920, right? This is how long it takes for this technological diffusion to go to all the firms so that you can increase the productivity of the whole country, right? And then we don't have to go back to the 19th century. We can go back to the information technologies right of the 80s, right? And what you can see is that you can see again this lag, right, in productivity effects of these information technologies. There was a very famous quote in the 80s and 90s that you can see computer age everywhere, but the productivity statistics, right? It was very difficult, and then economists were really surprised. How on earth is that we are not seeing the impact, right, of these new technologies on productivity? And the other thing we'll learn is that there's this huge heterogeneity in the impact of these technologies across countries. So when you look and across firms, when you look and see, hey, were these firms able to implement these technologies and what was the impact of these information technologies, you will see that there's a huge heterogeneity across firms. And what is really fascinating is that we have been working with retailers, banks, insurance companies. When you look inside these companies and try to understand the impact of these information technologies, you will see that there is a huge heterogeneity even within the firm. So think about retailer. We were fascinated by this. Why is that you have some stores that were able to adopt and implement these new technologies, and why is that you have the stores that basically did it very poorly, right? All of these stores are within the same processes. Why on earth is that you have this heterogeneity within the firm? And then the main conclusion we found is because you have differences in managerial practices. Better managed stores, better managed firms were able to adapt, right, to the production and businesses that you need, and business processes that you need to be able to adopt these new technologies. And this talks about the capabilities, the skills that you need to be able to adopt these new technologies. Okay, now of course we know that there are very important implications of what we call the organizational adaptation in the labor market. We know that during the last 30 years, we saw how these important changes within occupations, this is what we were talking about before, these routine and codifiable tasks were substituted by information technologies, and the non-routine cognitive tasks, right, were much harder to substitute, and these were the ones that were complementary to the new technologies, okay? Now, of course, there was a cost for the society of these information technologies. We saw how this exacerbation of the polarization between high and low skilled workers, right? And then we saw these imbalances, right, in the labor market, right? And now, basically, this is not now, even in the 90s and 2000s, the firms are dealing with these skills shortages. So what we think is going to happen with Gen AI is that I think we're going to basically see a similar movie, but play at a faster speed for different occupations. So here we have the task that could be automated by Gen AI, right? And then what we are saying is that what is really important about AI, and then of course you are now aware of this, is that AI codified what was previously uncodifiable, right? So we have all these protected occupations, managers, lawyers, creatives, that are now exposed to the risk of being automated, right? And then what is really interesting is that if you compare the demand for skills in 2022 versus the demand for skills in 2010, you see that now we have these huge differences in just 10 years. Think about 10 years. And now we are seeing these massive changes in the demand for skills, right, across industries. Now specific skills will be needed, right? And of course, new occupation, new tasks, new jobs will emerge, right? And then the question is, what will the future hold, right? And I think, of course, we are too early to understand who will be the winners and the losers of the Gen AI. But I think that in this uncertainty, basically, firms have three options. You resist the change, You let the forces of technological adoption play out without the firm intervention. Or you shift the direction of this technological adoption and work on how to lower the cost of adaptation inside the firm. These are the three options that all the companies have, right? Now, the question is how? Well, we believe that reskilling will play a very important role in lowering this cost of adaptation inside the firm. Right? And this is what we are finding. And I think that here you have these dual gains for the firms and for the workers that we discussed before, is that for the firms you can close, of course, the skill gaps that you have internally, and for the workforce, basically you are helping workers. Think about all these, go to the German companies, these auto companies that are the best producing cars. And now you're telling the best engineers in the world that they need to be electric engineers. Basically, their skills will become completely obsolete in 2-3 years, right? So of course, we can help workers basically to make this transition, but this transition is not easy. And I'll explain why it's not easy. So basically, it's not difficult, and then based on our interviews and surveys that we did here in the US, we actually find that it's really, really, really hard. And this comes back to this point, is that it's really hard for two reasons. First, we found that there's a very low take-up rates here in the US, very low take-up rates. And in Europe, we found the same thing. And then I will show you in a minute that this is not about convincing workers to yes, please go and reskill. No, this is about how workers basically will say, yes, I want to reskill. It requires a completely new mindset of how do you do this reskilling inside the firm. The other thing is the middle managers, and this is what really surprised us, like that we were talking before, is that we found two types of middle managers. We found the talent hoarders, that hoard talent, that are not great promoting this talent inside the firm. And then we found those who are amazing promoting talent. Right? These are the middle managers that export talent to the rest of the company. So this is a very important friction that now firms need to deal with, that how you get the buy-in of these middle managers, right? So it's not only that the C-suite and the CEO basically are on board, it's also about getting the buy-in of these middle managers. And then we found this is an HBR article that we wrote and we published this year. Basically, we interviewed 35 companies that we believe that were at the frontier in reskilling. Okay? And then we asked them a bunch of questions just to understand, well, why is that these firms are at the frontier of reskilling? And then we found that reskilling basically requires shifting to what we call a new training paradigm. Right? So what are these? First one is that what Fernanda was mentioned before is that reskilling is a strategic imperative. Reskilling cannot be a CSR initiative to support displaced workers. It will not work. It has to be a strategic initiative, right? Second, that is very important, is that reskilling cannot be cannot be the responsibility of HR. It will not work, right? We now understand all the frictions that we have, right? We need to get the buy-in. Reskilling, if you really want reskilling to work, then reskilling is the responsibility of every leader and every manager inside the organization. It goes beyond training. It cannot be another training initiative, right? It has to go beyond training. It's a change management initiative. It's to understand how do you connect your training with your strategy, with your new processes, with your new products. If you don't understand the whole package, it will not work. It will be very difficult for reskilling to work inside a firm. This is what we mentioned before, is that employees cannot, it's not about convincing employees. Employees want to be reskilled. This is very important because now you're asking people, hey, now you will be an electric engineer. And then you might have 4 frictions. These are the 4 frictions that we found inside the firms. Well, it could be that you don't have the information, and that's why you don't want reskilled. Suppose you have the information. It could be that you don't have the incentives. Well, suppose you have the information and the incentives. It could be that you don't have the motivation to be an electric engineer, right? But the most tricky one is it could be that you don't see yourself as an electrical engineer. And that's it. It's very difficult to convince you if you don't see yourself as an electric engineer. It will be very difficult, right? And this is one of the frictions we went through, we experienced with the company. And then we were surprised, right? And then the other thing is that reskilling is not the problem of one firm. Reskilling basically takes a village, right? Now, then the next thing we did is that we did a survey just to understand. We interviewed the firms that we believed were at the frontier, and then the next thing we did is that, well, let's do a survey here in the US to understand how far are firms from these best practices, right? And then for the second one, pretty good, but notice that what's going on with the employees, right? Firms are not getting remember, this is not about convincing employees. This is employees want to reskill, right? Right? There's a very important gap here, and a very important gap in the first one. Firms are not seeing it as reskilling as a strategic imperative. And that's why they don't connect reskilling with talent. You need to be able to connect your talent, pipeline of talent that we were discussing before, with your strategy. That has to be clear. Okay, and then, oops. What is really interesting is that most of them assessed basically the skill growth of participants, but only 16% of them basically are able to report the ROI of the reskilling program. And what is really fascinating is look at this. 12% reported a negative ROI. Okay, so then I want to spend 5 minutes on a final reflection, which is, well, now that we understand how hard it is to do this reskilling inside the firms, I want to ask you, how can the processes of technological diffusion be accelerated in an effective and equitable way in the age of AI? Let's just spend 5 minutes on these final points.
Can you ask it again, please?
Basically, how can the process of this technological diffusion that we were talking about, how can we accelerate that process within firms?
I mean, I think one critical thing, I mean, we're talking about 20 to 30% productivity improvements, all white collar workers here. I think the key is to get this to be the cultural norm in a company and not this sidecar interesting thing that 2% do. I think that's non-trivial. And I think that's at least part of the critical path. And that it's all the stuff you're talking about. But, you know, how do we get 20% of our employees using ChatGPT more than 10 hours a week? And I got 5,000 companies and 5,000 employees. That's a big challenge.
And what is interesting is that we're working with a large retailer. It's not about using ChatGPT. It's about how do you use it properly. That will be able to increase the productivity. Because we were working with this company, and then they are worried because when they look at the prompts, most of the prompts are about holidays, vacations, and then we're paying a lot of money for ChatGPT Enterprise. How on earth is that this is not working inside the firm, right?
Yeah, in the age of AI, we should definitely utilize AI-based technology to identify your skills, your potential skills, adjacent skills, and also like faraway skills to train. And there are other technologies that utilizing AI for internal mobility, more quick and efficient hires, time, skills, but the pays, all that is being developed with AI. We should definitely take advantage of it.
That's a great point. We should take advantage of all these tools to create this dynamic internal labor market of the firms, right?
Look at all delivery systems. So it doesn't have to be something just provided internally to the company, but you can access other programs. There's a lot of companies now that are looking to be part of this. There's community colleges. There are places where people are already going. And so look at that as a way to give people choice.
Right. Look at the ecosystem, all the options that now we have. Mm-hmm. Yes. Me? Yes. And then you. Sorry. You start first. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to build on her point to say that case studies are usually a really good way to get people to reconsider. So within companies, I've found that maybe if it's a healthcare business, or let me use my own example. Like when I was working in marketing, bringing the multicultural director of Black Panther to my team to show them how multicultural marketing can win at scale. And so all of a sudden, like giving people the tools and a case study of how something goes well enables them to now see how they can do it themselves. And so the closer you can get it to your industry, and it can be based on a core competency or it can be based on a project, when people are able to see other people doing it in a way that's applicable to them, all of a sudden you're lowering the barrier to entry or at least the barrier to starting.
Right. Right, that's why we love HBS, right? Great point. Case studies are great. And then I have seen these, like using more case studies inside the companies. Sorry, you were going to say
I was
something.
just thinking of something Mary said this morning, which is, I think it's easy for naysayers to look at AI do the job and say, that slide deck sucks. I would have done that much better. And so I think there's something at the top, which is an orientation around what we're expecting to come out of this, and that it may not be as good as you would do it yourself. The point is, it is cutting the time to the first draft, right, in that particular example. And so I do think I've seen other tech implementations go wrong because they aren't as good. But what's missing is the story of what are we doing it for? It's not to replace the current work. It has a different purpose. So there's some really high-level narrative setting that I think probably is required before you're plunging people into the actual training.
And who should set the narrative?
The CEO, probably.
See, right? We need to understand what is the purpose, right? Where is that going, right? And then this comes back to the CEO is the one that we need. If this is a strategic imperative for the company, but the CEO needs to be involved.
I think it's important to the narrative that you build here is that using AI as a co-pilot. I think that's very important. That it's a co-pilot. It's not taking away your jobs, but certain things need to change within the organization itself. And what I also want to emphasize is the measurement and the yardstick, meaning the KPIs and the how are you measuring the growth. Yeah.
Do we need new KPIs?
I think so. Yeah.
What would be those?
So the defect rate. How are we changing the adoption to the new defects, and how much is the rate of defect going down versus what it was initially with when AI was not adopted. So those are the things that those systems, those measurables need to be in place to understand whether AI is working or it's not working.
Right.
I think you also have to think exponentially about what's possible because we're all so used to constant incremental improvement. And it's hard to imagine things that are going to leap you, exponentially forward. And so I think sometimes we hold the bar a little low based on past experience.
Right. And let me just share some final reflections, of course. The first one is about capabilities, right? I think that I have seen a lot of companies going not blindly but naively into, we don't need to build the skills. We don't need to build the capabilities. First, you need to worry about the capabilities. What are the capabilities that you need if you want to do this correctly inside the firm? And then you go into all the AI tools and how AI can help you. But be aware that you need, what are the skills that I need for these tools to work? If I don't have the skills inside the company, it will not work with a very high probability, right? So you need to invest, right? I think it's a great opportunity for the firms, but and a great opportunity to increase the engagement of the workers. But you really need to understand what are the capabilities and what are the investments that you need, right? These, what we economists call complementarities inside the firm, right? To be able to, so otherwise these new tools will not work inside the firm. And I want to just share one final reflection, which is what we have seen with all the interviews and the surveys that we did is that business leaders play a fundamental role in these changes, right? So we're seeing that business leaders is what we were talking about. What is the purpose? One key role of the business leaders is, well, we need to be aligned on where are we going? How is it we're going to use this technology? What are we going to do inside the company? And this is the role of the business leader. Business leader, the CEO is the one that needs to tell me, is the one that needs to provide this alignment inside the company, right? We need to be selective. These are the discussion that what Yoshimi mentioned is that we need to understand what are the key skills, what are the skills that are strategic for the company, right? When I work with companies and I ask them for their training programs, they show me usually a list of more than 2,000 training programs. And then the first question you ask, well, how these training programs impact the firm? Do you have a measure? I'm not saying a number, just a sense. Do you really understand how these training programs basically translate into productivity, which should be the basics? No, we know very little about how all these list of training programs basically translate into productivity. So we need to be very selective into what is that we are targeting. Right? What are the key strategic skills that we need inside the firm? And of course, to me, the most difficult one is the commitment, right? When we think about reskilling, we are thinking about commitment, right? We are telling workers, yeah, we will help you to reskill, but we as an organization need to commit, right? For you, we are committed, we have this commitment of your future inside the organization. And to me, this is really, really, really what is really difficult for firms to commit. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.